All right. So I wanted to interview Lee because I feel like he's a true, legitimate wholesaler who does the business right. And I feel like there's a lot that you guys can learn from him. Plus, he has a raving fan base. He had like 15 people RSVP. They're like, Lee, we want to hear from Lee. So
this
I
is
thought
this
it'd
is
be
my
fun to
Arrested
interview him.
Development. This is my
Yeah.
Arrested Development moment.
Yeah.
There are dozens of us. Dozens.
So, anyways, wanted to interview this no good, dirty wholesaler. Lee, I want you to take away. Tell us a little bit about your background and what led you into real estate.
It's dirty good for nothing. It's dirty good
dirty
for nothing.
Good for nothing. God,
yeah,
I gotta get that right.
No one checked with me on that before that got published. But
are you gonna like copyright that and like trademark that?
If I had a face for Instagram, there's probably money in that. Thankfully, I have a face for radio, so we're gonna let that one slide.
That's actually a really good name for a podcast. If you thought about it,
it would be. It would be. For my fourth job, that's what I'll do. So, so what was the question? The question was, how did I get into it?
Yeah, how'd you get into this? What led you to the real estate path to begin with? What's your origin story?
So I am a salesman, and people have heard that before. I'm the type of guy that back when I was in a far more corporate setting, I was very comfortable calling myself a salesman. I didn't have to call myself new business development. I didn't have to call myself, marketing application. I was in sales. And so I've spent my entire life, whether it was bicycles or backpacks and sleeping bags and jackets, or most recently, prior to full-time real estate, copiers and phone systems. I've spent my entire life being comfortable with that label. And so helping people make buying and selling decisions is what I've always done. It's what I've always been passionate about. It started when I was, the first probably real taste of it when I was about 8 years old, and a buddy of mine in Cub Scouts, Little League Baseball, his dad owned a Christmas tree farm. And so in December, this was in South Georgia, so we were in shorts and a t-shirt, so it was 84 degrees out on December 18th. We'd be out there throwing a football around and helping people cut down Christmas trees and blow out dead needles and send them home. And I made an observation at a very, very early age that I really loved selling Christmas trees because no one was unhappy when they went to go pick out with very few hilarious exceptions, no one was unhappy picking out a Christmas tree. And so helping in that at a young age in a really safe environment, again, no one's unhappy. No one's going to scream at you when something doesn't work right on a Virginia pine, sort of cemented that for me. So I figured that out pretty early on. Went to a small college here in Chattanooga. That's how I landed in Chattanooga in the first place. Wasn't even on my radar, but went to school here. And over the course of 5 years of undergrad, figured out that I really liked Chattanooga. And so hung around after graduation. And like I said, had a couple different successions of jobs. The precipitation for real estate was just a big change in a local company. Kind of had my mind made up for me that I wasn't going to be in technology sales anymore at that company. And so it forced my hand. I had a couple buddies in Knoxville who up until that point largely they started like a lot of folks do. They were buying stuff off the MLS and flipping it. I think the guy that I worked with, his first flip, he made $7,000 and he hadn't really done a whole lot of homework or research and was tickled. He was thrilled. He had no idea that was not a great turn. That over time, right? We did actually get better. And so I came along. There were two guys up there that were good friends. I came along right as they sort of tripped over the concept of wholesaling. Mm-hmm. And what it became for that shop is not unlike what I do now. There's a few differences, but the idea is by wholesaling, you can create a justification to market for houses directly as opposed to waiting for someone else to deliver it to your inbox or your text message or something like that. And it is very earnestly the pressure blow-off valve. It's the way that you can justify signing 2 or 3 contracts in a month when you can really only justify flipping one of those on a semi-consistent basis with the resources and crews that you have at your disposal. And so it allowed us to cherry pick. I showed up as a goofy salesman and just someone who likes to close and rapidly follows opportunities to get blue ink on paper. And I was a really good fit for that. And so was with that shop for many, many years. Started by driving up to Knoxville, sometimes 5 days a week, because that's where the work was. Took us ages to figure out how to start marketing in a second market. That was Chattanooga. So that started happening, and I didn't have to drive as much, which was really nice. And that company grew exponentially. Pick your startup real estate firm in 2018 and chart that, and that's what it looks like. And
Nice.
Went through a ton of growth, went to multiple markets. I moved into a couple different roles, including at one point I was just the dispositions manager. And so I was handling all of the dispositions strictly on the wholesale side. I wasn't buying, and I wasn't doing anything to do with the flip department. And COVID hit, and that was weird. And
You know what was weird to me during COVID? I expected the market to go down, and everybody's like, "We hate living where we're living." It went right up.
yeah,
I was
well,
just blew my
yeah,
mind.
for 6 weeks, we all thought the world was over.
Yeah.
And
I remember people saying, "All right, we're finally gonna have a recession, so we can pick up some good deals."
right. And it had been a great rise for a couple of years there. We'd seen a lot of growth, and then just the afterburners kicked in.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, I should say, at the same time, in 2018, there were very few people doing what we were doing in Knoxville and Chattanooga and Greenville and in markets like that. We were fairly unique. By the time COVID hit, I've got a theory on this. I'll try and be brief. By that point, the concept of off-market real estate, thanks to Instagram and Facebook and going to a seminar at the Marriott, had really just taken off. And so you've got a massive shift in employment requirements, or employment, people who did really well as a exec for a Fortune 500, and because of COVID got canned. And they're sitting on a fat severance check, and they're saying, I've been saying I was going to do real estate for years. That's it. We're doing it. And they buy a list, which is not hard to do. And they buy postcards, which is not hard to do. And they open Outdoor Magazine to Chattanooga, which is not hard to do, and then cross-reference that with biggerpockets.com, which is not hard to do, and say, yeah, Chattanooga's thermonuclear. We're going to kill it because we're smart, and we're going to stack our list, and we're going to cross-reference our list with distressed property indicators. And everyone had a slightly different spin, and everyone had a slightly different sizzle. The problem was everyone had it. So every homeowner in Chattanooga starts getting.
I remember that, because I remember before, wholesalers would market to people and send postcards and stuff. But yeah, about 2021, common folk were like, I'm sick of these people messaging me about selling my house. And I was like, I'd never heard that before prior to that. Like you mentioned, I never put two and two together until you just explained that.
Yeah. And for years, I'd been going on acquisitions appointments. And for years, I would sit down with a seller, in their living room, and they'd pick up their stack of postcards that they'd been saving for 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was 1.5 inches deep, but they'd been saving it for 3 years. And I'm convinced there was, multiple millions of dollars in postage spent in Chattanooga alone to market to Chattanooga-based residences. And it is what it is. You could say it oversaturated the market. It didn't. It's not that it oversaturated. It's that it spread the deals out massively. My theory is most respondents to that type of marketing, it is a convenience. A catastrophic. I shouldn't use the term catastrophic because I don't actually love the concept of a distressed seller. But a big event happens.
Yeah.
And a need to make a change happens, and you call the postcard on top of the stack. And if you're the marketer, the real estate guru, and your postcard's on the stack and your number comes up, great, you got the deal.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about the market right now, is because motivated sellers is where, traditionally in past markets, that's where you found deals. But with the economy like it is, and all the equity that's been presented the past couple of years, I think that's one reason it's harder to find deals right now, because if you lose your job, you can still sell your house real quick. And then, so there's just less motivated sellers in the market.
Yeah.
I think
sell
that's
your house
about keeping the deals thin.
Yeah. So that company grew a whole bunch, and the hard part in that kind of post-COVID era was that one of the challenges of wholesaling that is very real is that you are by definition transacting a contract. You're transacting equitable interest in a limited market. You're making the choice not to take a product that is commensurate, because selling a deed and selling a contract are two different things. I'm not a real estate agent. I don't pretend to be one. But you're making a conscientious decision to market a off-market wholesale assignment to a smaller pool of buyers.
Right.
And so you're choosing not to pursue the MLS, and hopefully the wholesaler is doing a good job of actually listening to the client and trying to understand their situation. We can talk more about that in a minute. But so that company really struggled. We struggled with how much opportunity we were missing by choosing to sell off market. And that's in a period where people were paying ARV for a lovely home that needed $80,000 of updates, and you were hitting ARV or ARV from 3 months ago, which didn't matter because it was appreciating so fast that you'd make it up anyway.
Yeah.
And so that company moved away from wholesaling. I really like wholesaling. So I long short called my favorite frenemy in Chattanooga. I called my favorite competitor, who ran a fantastic shop, but that was a very different mindset as far as where the opportunity lie. Recently, I had, after years of working in real estate, I had finally jumped into the investing and real estate ownership scenario personally, and with my dad, but as an individual, own more than one house that I lived in. And so the arrangement that I find myself in now is absolutely fantastic. It's really great. I do not have to figure out how to comp a house in Greenville. I do not have to figure out what's going on in Huntsville, why Birmingham is a great market. Those are all true. But you could push me out of a bus in Greenville and I'd go,
that was another trend I saw. Like wholesalers used to be very local market based, and then a lot of them went like national. And I was thinking, I mean, that's really impressive, the ones who are able to do that and put that structure together, because it just
sure. And it's not a bad model. I'm not here to vilify the big guy. There's a lot of 800-pound gorillas out there who have made millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Oh yeah.
And I was
thing about real estate is there's no one way to make money in real estate.
Sure. As it turns out, for Lee, for the little bald weirdo in Chattanooga, right? I really like the way I get to do things now, which is, so I've kind of come full circle, right? So I started going to Knoxville, finally figured out how to get Chattanooga going. I love that. And then we blew up, 36 employees, HR department, full-time recruiter, and then kind of contracted massively from that, because a lot of those decisions were made in a bubble that was probably not normative for years and years. And so if someone were to call me old school, I would probably take it as a compliment. And I can tell you why the two different Hollywood drives in Rossville are going to value very differently per square foot. Right. And it's because I've been inside of about 5 houses in both of them.
Yeah.
So I hope I say it with humility, not with arrogance, but I do say that with firsthand knowledge. So there's my story. I'm just a salesman who likes to pedal and chill.
So let me ask you this. What was, out of all the sales jobs, what was it? Because I believe that real estate, is a lot of sales and marketing. Like the business in the end for what we do is you got to market to find the deals, and you got to have the sales skills to close the deals. What was it from sales that you learned from all those jobs that transferred to real estate that, people probably, like you mentioned, all the people bought the list, did all the marketing, but the sales skill and the human aspect, I think, is very important. What's that skill set that you think is important that maybe some other people don't have or should learn?
That's a great question. So it would be easy to answer very off the cuff, but I do think what I will answer you with is maybe harder to apply if your aspirations are to operate a wholesaling operation in 20 different markets. Not impossible by any means, but I think harder. I think that understanding when someone has a good reason to make a big change, and understanding when someone has a problem that your sales solution will not resolve is really important. And so if I can flesh that out a little bit, I'll give an example. So if someone raises their hand and says, I would like to sell my house, I need an offer for my house, I think it is very easy to follow a script that you bought from a expert whose course
Right.
you went to, and you pull up PropStream or CRS or Zillow or whatever your favorite tool is, and you do the homework because you got a live one, right? Someone actually responded, and figure out how to make an offer that is most compelling. And I think what a lot of people miss is the value of saying, that's great. Tell me what you're trying to do. And that's a really hard question to ask, because you have to ask it 1,000 different ways for a lot of different people. And some people are very open with that information, and some people are not. And so you have to have rapport, and rapport and sales go hand in hand. That word is hackneyed at this point. It's so overused. But you have to build enough trust for someone to give you a good reason for why they're wanting to do what they're doing. Mostly because if you can flesh out in 5 minutes that a person calling you from Alton Park has a nephew in Brentwood who's selling their 6-bedroom, 7-bathroom 2013 build, and they need to sell their house to be able to pay cash for that. I'm picking a very extreme example. You can say, well, okay, so what were you hoping to get for your house? And they say, well, I needed to get $2.7 million. And you go, probably going to be tough for me to justify that. I think the thing that gets missed is understanding what someone's goal is. Because if you understand what someone's goal is, if you understand I came from a particular sales psychology. If you understand someone's pain, then not only can you buy something at a very attractive price to the investor, something that's going to be very enticing, you can actually do a better job of serving them. And I'm enough of a doofy optimist that I actually believe those two things can go hand in hand. And so, I guess the other side of that coin is, if at your core you don't believe in win-win scenarios, I don't care if you're in real estate or copiers or Christmas trees or Learjets. I think that's a hard place to keep the faith and not become a very, very cynical person and enjoy sales. And so there's a lot of things in there that I think I could dive into, but I think that sense of being willing to ask the question about what the pain is, because if you can very early on identify, I get it, I see what you're trying to do, I can't do that. Have you thought about perhaps calling a guy named Braden Doctor, who is an outstanding real estate agent and distinguished in his field and very talented, and works really well with investors, or works really well with, as is home sales on the MLS. You can actually refer someone a better direction. And I'm picking on Braden because he's someone I get to do that for, maybe not on a daily basis, but several times a week. Long answer. Sorry about that.
No,
Great.
I totally agree with you. I
We
think
spent a lot of time on it.
I think going, like, the way I was taught getting into all this was that when you talk to a seller, they'll tell you they want X amount of dollars, but then the next question is, well, what do you plan to do with that money? Because then you can drill down to what they need versus kind of what they want, and how you can build that win-win solution.
Sure.
Because I'm like you, I think it takes win-win solutions, because if you're not open to win-win and trying to help the other person get what they need, and then it almost blinds you, I think, to possibilities and deal structures that exist, outside the box.
That's really well said, Shane. Like, it blinds you to opportunity. And yeah, you can get really myopically focused on convincing someone that they can never get $130,000 for their house, that the most they can ever get for it is $96,000, because that's what my equation that I spit something into tells me. And so being very comfortable, I think I see people, I don't get to observe people who aren't me doing this very often. I think I often see people who very much have a mindset of I'm right and you're wrong. And if I can simply prove that I'm right and you're wrong, then I have a deal. And frankly, if someone sets out to do that to you or me, we probably get a little butthurt and, tend to dismiss that person, even in the midst of needing what their services may entail. So cheesy example. One of the most profitable deals I've ever done was a deal that actually kind of got referred my way. It was someone who had a beautiful home in a very prestigious part of North Chattanooga. Great part of town, right down the street from a really desirable elementary school. And he'd called me and said, hey, I met with this gal. She wants $200,000. Now, at that point, years ago, the ARV on this house was in the fours. No questions asked. But the house was in atrocious shape. It had been, literally someone had raised the window. They weren't broken. They'd raised the windows about 20 years ago and never lowered them. Just amazing. It was a temperate rainforest inside of the house. And she wanted $200,000, and he told me that. Like, he said, hey, she told me this, and there was no way that she would ever sell it for less than 200. And everything I do tells me to come back to that 30% rule. I need to be buying the thing at like 160. That $40,000 is a wide gulf. It's a very wide gulf. So he referred me her way, and I went and I sat down and we chatted and took a lot of time and walked around as her childhood home, a lot of emotion attached to that. And asked some questions and found out what she was doing. She lived next door to this house. So they had two family homes side by side. And she had already sold the one she lived in, and she needed to sell this one. And the guy who bought the one she lived in didn't want this one with a 10-foot pole. And she was moving to a new spec home build in Saudi, really significant change. And she was thrilled, but she needed to sell this other one. And I found out she had an annuity that was going to continue, that her parents had started for when she was 21, and it was going to pay for another 3 years. She was in her 50s. I think her parents were pretty wealthy. And that was going to quit paying in 3.5 years from the day we were sitting there. I said, well, how much does that annuity pay every month? And she thought, and she went, well, it pays $436. And I said, okay, well, what would happen if you had a different structure that would kick in and start paying you $436 in 3.5 years, so you never missed a beat? And she went, that would be amazing. I've been worried about what I'm going to do without that income. So I bought her house for $10,000 down, $436 a month, $200,000 total, but I didn't have to start paying for 3.5 years.
Nice.
And at the closing table, the end of the story is at the closing table, after everything was said and done, I said, why did you want $200,000 specifically? That's a very round number. She looked me dead in the face and she said, oh, about 10 years ago, when Meemaw passed, I went down to the records office to put the deed in my name. And the lady there at the counter, she said, oh, I know this street. That's down the street from that school, isn't it? And I said, yes, it was. And she said, oh, that's a wonderful part of town. If you ever sell that home, don't you take a penny less than $200,000. A bureaucrat teller at the Hamilton County Records Office had set her bar a decade before she and I ever met.
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of other stories that I probably don't know as well. That one happened to string together really well. We turned around and sold that house for $207,000 4 days later. Nice. And we created a owner finance structure that was insane. It funded every flip we did for years to come.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah. And you did that just by talking to her and digging into her and finding out, how you can best structure it. Again, it's win-win. So
I tripped over the annuity. Yeah. And I connected the deal to that. Listening. Sure, I got lucky. Yeah. But yeah, I asked a question that no one else had asked.
Mhm.
And the how she got the money delivered wasn't important. It was important that the contract said 2000000. That's what mattered.
So I think honestly, out of all the things in real estate investing, I think wholesaling is probably one of the toughest ones. Um, what
I
advice
got
would
this
you give?
compliment.
No, I really think it is because you got the market to generate leads, and unless you can't door knock too, but if you're going to do any sort of volume, so you're spending money out. Wholesaling is not a consistent income stream like rental property, uh, so it takes a lot of skills to develop a business that's consistent. I think in wholesaling,
Sure.
where do you see most people going wrong when they try to enter that business?
Boy. It's going to be hard not to answer that with a very current timeline perspective for me.
Gotcha.
So yeah, let me try and broaden. I think I see people. I think I see people focus strictly on wholesaling, and they struggle with familiarity with the real world of cost. And I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but we all like to kind of give wholesalers a hard time who push something out, and I'll pick on the easiest neighborhood to do this in. Ferger Place, right off of Main Street's this little U-shaped street with some beautiful, beautiful homes on it. And it's surrounded by sort of East Main, which is, not quite as bougie, a great part of town, very much in the path of progress. But
Yeah.
you've got 4,000 square foot architecturally significant historic homes that literally are a block and a half away from a 720 square foot home that was built as cheaply as it could possibly have been built in 1936 and hasn't changed much. And so yeah, if you're strictly working on grinding that machine and missing the nuance, it's going to hurt. You're going to go through a lot of those cycles of being convinced of something's value. Sure, it's a little smaller, but as a house gets smaller in a neighborhood, the cost per square foot goes up. So it's actually in my favor, and getting sort of laughed out of the room. I think failure to understand the needs of the investor, because you've kind of got a client on both sides. And so if you're at a big shop, or if you're JVing, which is its own ball of wax that I actually have very little experience with, so I won't speak to how to do that well. If you're in that scenario and not controlling all sides of the transaction, I think it's really hard to tailor both of those deals to someone's needs. Your question is, how do you see new wholesalers go wrong? I've got a lot of really good friends that were sort of sole proprietor wholesalers. Maybe they were marketing on a very specific level. I know a couple guys that did pretty well with bandit signs back when you could do that.
Oh yeah, those actually were one of the best lead generators I ever did was bandit signs.
100%. Funnily enough, I've never run acquisitions marketing with bandit signs. I've
Mhm.
sold a bunch of wholesales really well with bandit signs.
Mm.
Uh, my favorite is the Dalton Home Depot. If you get a deal in Dalton, slap a sign on the
Right,
stoplight.
because the
Leave
Walmart
in
and Home
Home
Depot
Depot,
are right there. Right, yeah,
and then buckle your seatbelt in your
yeah,
office and plug your phone into the charger, because it's about
yeah.
to get spicy. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of those folks enter and leave. And I think the problem right now is there is a critical mass that if you're below a certain deal flow, to your point, you don't have consistent income, it's hard. And so I'll be very transparent in that our deal count for 2023, which we've just wrapped up, did not grow dramatically over 2024. It was actually a little lower for total deals. Our profitability was way higher. And so our value per deal was significantly higher. But if you are, we're a very small team, but we're still a team. And so we can support each other. I work really closely with Thomas DeMoss, and the guy's just fantastic at a bunch of stuff that I abhor and that I do not have great patience for. And so we make a good team. I think the mistake that drives those guys out is not necessarily one of poor technique or poor intention. I just think it's honestly a hard time to be operating at a close to the ground level. And I am close to the ground, but we're running TV commercials, and we have a web presence that's a decade old and respected, and that sort of thing. So I don't want to discourage anyone from doing that, but I do think that right now to make that a full-time hustle is difficult. It's not impossible, but it's the deal, the same volume issues that we're seeing on the MLS are impacting the off-market world too.
Yeah, and I like that you're just giving real solid, honest advice, because if you scroll through TikTok, you'll see like TikTok videos of wholesalers like throwing cash everywhere. Oh, all you got to do is just sign this, and it gives a false sense of how difficult it is to really do that, I believe.
So I'm going to be unfair because we can pick on the anonymous aspiring wholesaler. I love that you, I love that you went there, right? Of the 8 people listening right now, if one of you is motivated by really good camera work and good music and dollar bills, the question of where you apply yourself is moot. And I'm old now, right? So I can say that. I can be, throw out in the comments, sure, boomer, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I've been a salesman my entire life. I'm tougher than that. If that's your aspiration, you're chasing the wrong thing. Now, we just left real estate and transitioned into, Lee turns out to be a life expert, which is an absolute lie.
Lee started a coaching business, just so you know.
And I'm not. That would be job number 5. Thank you, Chris. No, and I'm being unfair, right? But if you're, why are you wanting to get into real estate? If it's to make lots of money, I don't think that's how it works. I just don't. And if your perspective of getting into real estate is to suddenly change your life, it's the worst industry to be in. Go roll the dice on your favorite latest digital currency or something. I don't know. I don't know the first thing about that. But you and I both know that success in real estate is done with iterational steps and good decisions over decades.
Yes.
And yes, that can lead to unbelievable wealth. Caveat, asterisk, let's hope we're all good stewards and not assholes with the wealth that we throw around very cavalierly. Again, different topic for a different time. But I think I'm thankful that I've found a role where I can pay my mortgage, pay my groceries, put clothes on my son's back, take my wife on a very responsible trip to France every couple of years, which is her passion. She's an unbelievably delightful creature. And I get to occasionally cherry pick a deal here and there that I add to a long-term hold portfolio with a mindset of trying to make it the best home it can possibly be for the person living there, and make that a good transaction that occupant of their home enjoys. So again, sorry, I covered a lot of ground there, and we kind of jumped.
I totally agree with you.
I do think there was a flash in the pan. The problem is we all, I'm not going to live for hundreds of years, right? I can only evaluate data based off of the last couple of years. And yeah, there are a lot of people that made a lot of money the last couple of years in real estate by wholesaling.
Oh, everybody's been smart the past few years.
Right.
I mean, you can't go around. You could have sold the house and made an appreciation profit.
Thomas and I have told this story to each other 100 times, right? Like if you're flipping a house and you blow your budget in the last couple of years, hopefully what that meant is you also blew your timeline. Because if you blew your timeline and it took you an extra 4 months to make get the thing to market, you were fine because the house appreciated another $30,000. You made your mistake back and you looked like a savant.
Yep.
It was a flash in the pan. I wasn't smart enough to see what it was in the moment, but I am just barely smart enough to look over my shoulder and go, that was an irregularity. And so, yeah, I think there's still a lot of room for faithfulness and diligence and hard work and problem solving. And you can do that as a wholesaler all day long. The particular moment we find ourselves in January of 2024 is that there's like 3 deals available, and I'm going to go get 2 of them. So, if you can live on 1 a quarter, more power to you. Sorry.
No,
So-
you're good. I think chasing money is because when I first started, I was in that bucket. I was chasing money and chasing numbers, and it basically led to a whole bunch of headache, mess, and bankruptcy, especially in the first market recession hit. So, starting about 2015, I've just been slowly growing a business, and I'm a lot less stressed. I'm doing things correctly, and it's just better. Like I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, I do. In my head, there's this concept, like I want to do, instead of a $5,000 weekend seminar, I want to do like free 20-minute seminars, and it's why not to get into real estate.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
It's again, it sounds like I'm a curmudgeon, and yeah, deep down.
No, I've
my
said
heart
it many
is
times. If I had
small.
taken a regular job coming out of college, just grew a career in a job and invested in real estate on the side, I would have a higher net worth. and then this roller coaster, I spent years on, because I believe it does take 5 to 10 years before you actually like get stabilized and get on a good path, assuming you've made good decisions and you're in the right market cycles. So,
that's right. Yeah. Well, and the piece you're alluding to that I think is not very sexy is that I now have the benefit of 2 decades of good management.
Yep.
And 2 decades, hang on, I've been in real estate for 7 years. So, no, I was working in high school. So yeah, close to 20 years of people giving me tools and people giving me ideas. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I'm not going to fault someone for going out and figuring that out on their own. But there's a guy that I worked for here in town for 7 years who's very much a mentor, and who I can call at the drop of a hat and say, what would you do about X and Y and Z? But the reason I do that is he spent 7 years while I was selling stuff for him, giving me the tools to understand that when someone calls you and they're angry about something, they may not be angry at you.
Right.
Or the idea that when you've got, this is one of my favorites, when you've got someone who's angry, you'll never have a better opportunity to help them.
My experience is, when someone's angry, they're angry usually because they're not being heard. Like someone hasn't listened to them. And if you just listen to them, that kind of dispels the anger, and then you can get to the solution.
Well, or perpetual salesman, if they're angry, there's the opportunity for change.
Yeah.
And it's a very powerful motivator. And yeah, I think you could corrupt it. You could take it to a very dangerous, that can be unhealthy, but that's an aside. Someone who's given me those tools. And yeah, at 24 years old, I wouldn't have known how to find my way out of a paper bag when it came to negotiating the sale of someone's most valuable asset. The single most precious holder of wealth that a lot of people will ever have. And so I won't tell people to be patient and just work, but I do think there's nothing wrong with standing on the shoulders of someone else for a while until you have enough clarity to know how to do that. When I first jumped into buying my own, real estate that I was personally investing in, not taking a cut of the assignment fee, I was actually pretty comfortable in that. And I sell deals to people all the time who are far less comfortable. And I don't ever want someone to make a bad decision. I don't ever want to be party to facilitating, a poor decision. But I'm not wise, but I have more wisdom than I had 15 years ago. And I'm okay with the timeline that I'm on. And I'm okay with saying to someone, you could pursue something like that. Just because you choose not to jump into wholesaling in January of 2024 doesn't mean you've failed at real estate.
Right. Yeah. Like, there's so many ways to make money in real estate. And one of the reasons I'm doing this sort of interview with different people local is because I think there's so many great people locally that you can learn from, that also know the local market, that you don't have to spend thousands of dollars for some guru on the internet or some mastermind with a bunch of, like we've got a great group of people here you can legitimately learn from.
It's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah. So another question, on the opposite end, as an investor, how do you know a wholesaler is legitimate And how do you screen wholesalers?
Great question. So there is no shortage of lists that you can hop onto and stuff shows up in your inbox. You can give your phone number to anybody and they'll text you deals. For an investor, it's very easy to look me up as a home buyer on a website and see a string of happy sellers who are sitting at the closing table with me. We actually work hard to make that very visible. On the wholesaling side, that's actually far less common. And so the one thing I'll tell people to watch out for is that the volume these days of joint ventures and remarketed deals and just because something looks good, it's never been higher. And I don't say that to discourage you from pursuing a deal, but asking a wholesaler to demonstrate that they are direct to seller, that's a common phrase in the wholesaling industry. The problem is you'll probably hear an answer yes, and you'll probably have to ask a few more questions to actually validate that. And again, a lot of people are a dispositions rep and they're not personally in cahoots with the seller. That doesn't mean that it's a bad deal or they're dishonest.
So can you just to kind of break it down even more simpler, what's the difference between direct to seller and a dispositions rep?
Yeah. So everything I do is direct to seller. I literally sat at the kitchen table or spoke on the telephone, if the owner lived out of town, and am responsible for architecting the structure of the transaction. And then I turn around and the exact same guy is describing that transaction to a prospective assignment buyer, someone who wants to buy my contract and the rights thereof, which come with the deed to the house. So that's an example of very direct to seller. And I don't want to say it's rare, but I think it's getting less common. You've got the dispositions agent side of things is much more of a larger shop. You don't really have provenance of who is talking to the seller. Again, there's nothing about that that's illegal. There's nothing about that that's inherently wrong. It's mostly that the concern mostly is that I think it's very difficult to get important questions answered. So you look at photos, clearly someone is living in the house, and you ask the dispositions rep, will the house be vacant at closing? And it's very easy for the dispositions rep to say, yes, the house will be vacant at closing. And if they've got a jam up acquisitions rep under the same umbrella that they're working with, and remember, I was part of a shop that did that. If they've got a great acquisitions rep, there is a lot of trust that you can put into that. There's a lot of reputation you can put into that. If they either don't have a good answer or don't have the ability to verify that, yeah, that's tough. That's a hard scenario to trust. And you could, and I see this happen a lot in the deep underbelly of my world. You buy a house and there's someone still living in it. And they're the seller's cousin. And I own a piece of property right now where my tenant is exactly that. They were the cousin to the seller. It was supposed to be vacant. It wasn't.
Yeah.
They had lived there. I think she's lived there for at least 15 years, and she's still a tenant. She's one of my best tenants, and she pays unbelievably consistently. And I've worked hard to keep her rent at a reasonable rate that covers the shockingly increasing insurance costs. Anyway, I'm off topic. So I think asking a few questions of the wholesaler is really important. And if what you get back is pushy, or if what you get back is someone who's questioning how serious you really are, well, if you're a serious investor, you're not worried about that. Yeah, proceed with caution. If someone tries to manufacture pressure, proceed with caution. There's not a lot of deals out there. There's a lot of pressure. If it's a good deal, it's a good deal, and a lot of people are going to be after it. A huge one. Sorry, I should probably cut to some nuts and bolts. If the dispositions rep isn't willing to allow you to put earnest money at a title company, and the earnest money in the contract is not well specified that it will be returned if a deal can't go through, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Don't ever PayPal someone an EMD. Don't ever wire someone an EMD that's not a title company you can verify with a phone call that you can make by Googling a business's phone number and confirming that that's the real business. That happens a lot. And unfortunately, my product gets shilled out there all the time. I literally, there's a big Facebook group that I'm completely silent in, but I'm still in. I've literally spotted my stuff on owner finance Facebook groups that have nothing to do with me, and it's a cash deal. It's not an owner finance deal, and it's someone trying to present it as a sub-2 deal.
So is that the scam they're trying to do? Because I've seen people like try to market your stuff, and I'm like,
so.
what's the point of that?
Well, there's two sides to that, right? There's people who are legitimately scammers and legitimately just trying to pick up, $1,000 EMD, because then it's $1,000 in their pocket. You can't go to Des Moines, Iowa to find them. The other side are folks who are presenting a deal that they have absolutely no equitable interest in, absolutely no contractual arrangement in, and their whole plan is to come back to the person who does and say, I've got a buyer. And so, yeah, funny, we talked about this beforehand. I'll be really brief. Funny, quick aside. I spotted one of my deals, which I had already contracted, but it was presented the way I had first presented it on a local Facebook group. And so I messaged the person who had it out there, and I said, hey, I'd like to take a look. And so within 10 minutes, I got a phone call from a local real estate agent who said, I've got a buyer for your property. I said, oh, that's great. Well, it's already under contract. And he said, oh, well, this guy really, really wants it. And so I'd love to offer you a better price if you'll break it. And then it came back around, and the kid that was shilling it my deal on Facebook sent screenshots of me talking to him, to the real estate agent who knows me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a little accusatory. It was pretty funny. He came back and said, oh, it was just you chatting to those idiot kids. And he threw them under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
I had coffee with the idiot kids, and turns out they're some really nice college students who are really enamored with dollar bills.
Yeah, they've been watching the TikToks.
They've got illusions of grandeur, but they're really nice folks.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe I can help. He had literally retained them to do that. And he was sending them my Google Drive link, which they then sent back to me when I asked for photos.
Gotcha. So he has some separation. So he gets like, I'm not doing anything unethical here.
Well, yeah. And I kind of was like, so why did you ask them to market my deal in groups that I'm or at all? And he didn't really have a good answer. He kind of sidestepped that
because he's licensed.
And so, yeah, and so it's frustrating to me, because that's a scenario where you've got absolutely no one creating value. Yeah, I may be an idiot, but I hope part of what I do is create value, and I create value for a seller, and I create value for a buyer. So if you have conversations with a dispositions rep who doesn't seem to be creating value, or there's something off, then I think it's okay to call a spade and say, no, I'm not going to send you some money until I can walk through the house, if that's your jam, or until you can send me a legitimate inspection report, which some people actually do, something like that. So there are a lot of ways you can ask questions, but
I would also think maybe seeing if they can provide like references of past deals to other investors, so you can maybe get some familiarity in names.
And that's, I tell you what, that's, I'm really fortunate, because I could go hop into Facebook and make a post and say, hey, anyone here bought a deal from me and think I'm mostly not an asshole? And someone would probably speak up and say, yeah, he's mostly okay. He's a little weird, but he's all right. If you're a remote wholesaler running a really great business and you've never picked up a deal in Chattanooga and you just started marketing here, you're not going to have that familiarity. And it doesn't mean that deal's bad. And I don't want people listening to go, well, and I can't buy from someone local. No, you can, and you can very successfully. It just pays to probably ask some questions about the provenance of the deal before you start throwing EMDs around. I don't know about you, but where I come from, $5,000 is a lot of money. Yep. I can do a lot with $5,000. Yep. So be careful where you send that in the end.
So here's a market specific question for you. What areas of Chattanooga do you see sort of the up and coming currently?
Great question. So as flip potential or as long-term hold, and there's a lot of subcategories, but do you want to break those down?
Yeah, you can break them down and take it one by one.
So I think from a flip potential, in Chattanooga, the absolute ceiling of rental revenue is probably about $2,500, right? A $2,500 a month rental in Chattanooga is a very, very fine home. There are exceptions to that, but I'm gonna pass on most of those. You can rent a home in a gated new build community for $3,000 a month. There's not a lot of those out there. So long short, if the ARV on something is north of $250,000, it's probably hard to make that eat as a rental unless you are literally just removing money from the market because you think the Russians are going to steal it and you literally want to put it into real estate and you don't care what the returns are. If that's the case, please call me. I have many real estates I'd like to sell you. So the growth area for flips are, I think, where you're going to see those emerging $200,000+ markets. I am still unbelievably bullish on Georgia. There is a lot of land down there. There are much fewer massive rivers, mountains, and railroad tracks to get in the way of it. Right. And so the opportunity, Walker County is huge. So everything between where I'm sitting in Hickson, hang on, we should back up. Everything between the state line and Lafayette has enormous potential. Some of the best, my clients who've bought investments off of me, who have flipped houses in that very North Georgia area, Tunnel Hill, Lafayette, Rossville, they've done very well. It's a desirable area. You can buy a house with a little bit of land and a dog and a couple of kids can run around on it. And you can do that for less than $300,000 today. That's very hard to do in a nice neighborhood in Chattanooga right now. Yeah. And so from a flip standpoint, I think that North Georgia pocket is great. I think Saudi Daisy is unbelievable. There's a part of the world that I probably shouldn't mention because I'm giving away my cards. I think Ray County, north of the new Hamilton County McDonald Farm industrial development, regardless of your political leanings on that, I think there's a lot of opportunity up there, and there's going to be a lot of growth up there. That kind of hits both sides, but I think there's flip opportunity in that North Hamilton County area for sure. East Brainerd is tough. There's always going to be a lot of demand for that, but I see that being pretty level, which is nice because you can comp stuff pretty easily. And so if you can comp something and the numbers are there and you're confident on your rehab costs, hey, knock yourself out.
It seems like East Brainerd and Appleton are kind of merging.
It's all just one thing. Yeah. College, Dale, Ottawa, Appleton, East Brainerd. Like it's all just kind of this amorphous mass. And there's a lot of huge developments going on out there. There's 600 and 800 unit home building operations that are happening, which are, bad for traffic, good for investing. And so that's right. On the rental side, exact same story. I'm enormously bullish on North Georgia because from a tenant standpoint, you'll get as much rent revenue in Rossville as you will in East Lake or East Chattanooga for a commensurate house, and you can buy it for $10,000 or $15,000 less. And so your
eviction laws are much easier in Georgia. You can file eviction and be out within 3 or 4 weeks versus Tennessee, where you have to have an attorney and it's a whole
right. Yeah, especially if you're self-managing, that's a huge point. Rentals, again, that Ray County, that development that's going to be coming. If you're a long-term hold person, I think that North Hamilton County pocket is going to do very well. Cleveland's fantastic. Cleveland's doing real well. There's a lot of Cleveland that is this side of Cleveland, so exit 20 and the bypass heading out to the Ocoee and that sort of thing. There's a lot of opportunity to make some really cute houses up there. So those are parts of town that I'm bullish in. My favorite giveaway is when someone reaches out to me, because we have an automation. So if you sign up for my list, you get an email from Lee that says, "Hi, welcome. Please tell me what you're interested in," which I'll immediately forget if you actually tell me. So take that with a grain of salt. But they'll respond and they'll say, "Oh yes, Lee, we are very excited about the prospects of growth in Red Bank and 37405, and we'd really like to see all of the deals that you have available in Red Bank and 37405." I go, well, hello, Oregon. I hope it's warm this time of year up there. I hope you guys are doing great. If I get anything in 37405, you won't hear about it. And the secret is I'm not getting anything in 37405. It's not that I'm keeping it all. It's that there are no deals there. And so, I think what you're asking is really relevant, because I think if you become myopic on where you've seen people have success, you are absolutely looking at the tailgates of the bus, and you're choosing to make your margin more difficult to attain by choosing to invest in areas that have already really appreciated. So again, that could be a much deeper thing, but I guess as I sit here and think about it, a lot of what I described wasn't the core. A lot of what I described was the periphery, right?
Yeah.
East,
Yep.
I
I've always
should
been a
talk
fan
about
of Northwest Georgia.
Yeah, East Ridge is great. There's a lot of opportunity in East Ridge. You've got another one of those kind of small municipalities that maybe didn't keep up with Chattanooga and had a chip on their shoulder, and so it stifled a little bit of growth. And now they're making some strides. I think they're doing some really cool things. But there's an opportunity there to get in ahead of that and ride a wave there.
So put on your hat and crystal ball and 8-ball, whatever. Where do you think the market's heading the next, I don't know, 6 months to a year?
It's good, right? I'm rubbing two sticks together to try and make a fire so I can feed my family. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm swimming in deals. I think it's going to be good. My world is not directly impacted by interest rates, but interest rates affect everything. So the answer is it is. The scuttlebutt is from people smarter than me that those are going to go down. I think that will stimulate some changes that will trickle down into some of my world. I think people have been bracing for a recession shock that doesn't seem to be coming. And so at a certain point, you can't hold your breath forever.
Right.
So a lot of the places where I am a really good fit, where, for instance, there's a house that's been owned by a family for 60 years and grandma passed away 9 years ago, and we got together for Thanksgiving. We finally said, okay, we got to do something with this thing. Let's call this guy named Lee. I think we'll see that start to pick up. I'm hopeful that starts to pick up a little bit. I am eternally thankful I do what I do where I do it. I wouldn't trade places with someone in Texas or the coasts or the Northeast for anything in the world. And so I think as investors, if that's who we're discussing here, I think that's a really big opportunity. Chattanooga is going to no matter how hard things are, Chattanooga is going to outperform so much of the country because we have so much momentum for employment and growth and good things. And so I'm a proud Chattanoogan. I'm not a native. I'm an adopted Chattanoogan, but I've been here for 20 something years. And so I think it's going to be a good year. I think all of us are going to have to make sure we are not trying to run the same equation that we were running in 2020 or the same equation that we were running in 2018 to make an investment make sense. So that's not very crystal ball-y. That's
fine.
Is the nose on your face, but I think it can be a good year. I am not nervous about some boot dropping and avoiding everything.
Yeah, I feel basically the same way. So okay, we've been running for about an hour. So do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to say? And then let people know how they could contact you and get on your list for deals, and then go on the thread after we're done and post a link to your email and all that.
Sure, happy to do it. Yeah. My website is wholesalehouseschattanooga.com. That's where Thomas and I do post deals. Immediately on the homepage, you can put in your name and your email and some data that will automatically add you to my list. I don't even have to touch it. It's way more reliable. That way I don't misspell your email. And so if you want to get deals from a guy who does that, that's the place to do it. My phone number is even on there, and you can call me if I can help. I'm happy to, at least be a sounding board. In my line of work, I never know when the exact next deal is going to show up. And so it's, I don't have a menu. You can't order what you want, but happy to try and make those deals fit where they make sense for someone.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we will end it up here. I am very grateful you came on and shared your knowledge. And you're welcome to come on and talk anytime, or even speak at my landlord luncheon 1 month if you want to. So
happy to do it if we don't run them off.
All right, Lee. Well, I appreciate it. And we will talk to everybody else later. I don't think I saw any questions. I just saw some compliments. So you got some compliments.
That was very kind. I don't know where they are. So that's awfully kind of folks.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll talk to you guys later. I appreciate it, Lee.
Cheers.